Wi-Fi, I think anyone who puts Wi-Fi into a school should be locked up for the rest of their life. I really do. I think they're not fit to walk on the surface of this planet because they haven't looked at the research, and whatever incentive they have, it is not worth the genetic problems that parents are going to face with their children when they're born. And if you think of a single parent, a mother, who has a genetically deformed child, that particular mother will feel guilty because she gave birth. She will feel guilty and she will be worried every single second of every single day for her life. She will worry that the child won't marry. If the child can marry, she'll worry that the children will carry the disease, which they will. She will worry when she dies who will take care of them. So you are condemning both the family and the children to a lifetime of absolute hell. And this is already published. It is available to look up. It's what I call intentional ignorance. They are offered some sort of incentive and they think, oh, this is going to be good, we'll have it. Now the problem is, imagine you are a 15-year-old schoolgirl. All of the 400,000 eggs in your ovaries were with you at birth. They're not fully developed, but they're with you. They are 10 times more susceptible to radiation than all of the other DNA in the body. And scientists don't realize that. They don't read all of the papers as I do. So you have this highly susceptible genetic material which is going to make your children. And you are irradiating it because Wi-Fis, they are transmitters as well as the routers, as well as the ones either side of you. They are all transmitting at this height through your ovaries. So you are risking the damage, the DNA damage of your child every time you sit down and you use Wi-Fi. And it's like saying, if I smoke a cigarette, which one will cause the damage? The answer is I don't know. It could be the one today. So you now have a child that has a probability of being genetically damaged. But the real damage is when that child grows up. You have genetic material in your ovaries which could be damaged. Now, the real problem comes, so you have a child that could be born genetically damaged, but the real problem comes when you become pregnant. If you are a teacher or a mature student and you become pregnant, because the embryo inside your womb, in the first 100 days, all of those 400,000 eggs are forming in your embryo, your child's ovaries. So your child could be born with genetically damaged eggs. And the main thing about the eggs in the ovaries of your child is that they have absolutely no protection. It hasn't been developed yet. We have a natural protection against microwaves. It was developed since the Stone Age against thunderstorms and massive amounts of radiation coming into our body. But in your embryo, your uterus, in the fetus, where your child is developing for the first 100 days, in the ovaries, the eggs do not have that protection. So they are at maximum risk from radiation. And for the first month or so, you wouldn't even know you were pregnant. you wouldn't even be taking precautions. That is the main danger area. So you give birth to a daughter, but her ovaries are now contaminated. She may be normal, she may be genetically damaged, but her ovaries are at the most risk. So when your daughter grows up and she becomes pregnant and has a baby, this is where one of these eggs will be fertilized and come out. So the real damage here is your grandchildren. That is where it is going to show most. And we already see this in animals that have reproductive cycles of a year or 2 years or 3 years. We're already seeing this, and it has been published by veterinary schools and vets and scientists, so we know this happens. And it's also been documented in the Cold War when women were deliberately microwaved. So we know it does happen. The documents are there. And what you're risking by putting Wi-Fi into schools is the future generations of all of these girls. But it gets worse, because this particular DNA, the mitochondrial DNA inside you, and the DNA inside you, the mitochondrial DNA, you can trace unchanged to your mother, her mother, her mother, right the way back to the beginning of the human race in Africa, the Stone Age. You can trace your ancestors, if you could, right back to the very first lady. It is unchanged, the mitochondria. And that is being unchanged in your children, which means if you damage it, your child could be genetically damaged, then her child, and her child, and her child, forever. You are condemning the future generations of every single child until there are no more lines left in the female in your family. You must stop. A female must stop producing children for this to stop. So when you put Wi-Fi in schools, what you're saying is, for the sake of a little bit of money that saves getting a workman in to drill holes through the walls to feed cable, because it's cheaper, we're just going to put Wi-Fi in, but you can have genetically damaged children for the rest of your family's career. That's what we're saying. It's been shown that a child using a cell phone, just an ordinary school child, if the child uses the phone for just 2 minutes, the brain waves can take up to 2 hours to return to normal. 2 hours. And that's been published. Now, in those 2 hours, the child's brain is not acting as it should. And it could demonstrate itself in a number of ways. For instance, if the child were in school and made a quick call from the playground, it could be lack of concentration, hyperactivity, bad behaviour. It could be anything like that. And that would slowly ease off over 2 hours. Now that's just from 2 minutes. Now if a child makes a phone call every couple of hours, the brain is going to be entrained permanently. And it's already been published by the industry that a child using microwaves just before bed will have his or her sleep totally disrupted by entrainment. I cited, I think, 200 schools in Europe where a transmitter had been put in or near the playground where they had leukemia clusters. Some of our own MPs here have stood up in Parliament to say that they have 11 children under the age of 11 with leukemia around a transmitter, or 18 children. I mean, it's so. I mean, cancers are reaching epidemic proportions. There are lots of different types of cancers coming up now. I know in China, they've just had a 3,000% increase in parotid gland cancer, which is the side of the face where you would hold a mobile. We're getting cancers of the eye coming up. Obviously, brain tumours. In fact, brain tumours are quite enormous now in terms of numbers. That I read a report, and I read this out in Canada last year. People are so worried about the numbers of brain tumours that they've re-diagnosed 10,000 brain tumours as endocrine cancers to take them off the statistics. And I do know that in the European Union, we have been told that cancers are at epidemic proportions, and we're talking generally cancers between the ear and the brain. Years ago, our government said to its scientists, when it comes to microwaves, you will only talk about things to do with heat, and that is it. So they won't even discuss anything else. They will deny anything that doesn't have anything to do with heat. Yeah. They even deny all of their 40 years of research leading up to this. Yeah. Although they've said this can cause cancer and all the damage, they say, no, it can't. We're only looking at heat, and heat is all that matters. Yeah, I prefer to call it lying.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I think I've never known so many liars in my life as what is coming out now from the government. Put it simply, they did all the research, they knew the dangers, and then they decided to lie to the public for no other reason than to save themselves with lawsuits and to make money for industry. And that's written down, and I've got that written down. Okay. So for the last 40 years, the English government, has been lying to the people. And the American government, the Canadian, the Australian, they have been lying. They have been lying to protect industry, protect their profits, to protect themselves from lawsuits. So they are really just liars, and it's provable. I made a statement in Birmingham, in this country, probably 15 years ago, and I haven't changed it since. And I've said that I believe that this industry and the part of the government which is encouraging them will be responsible for more civilian deaths and suffering than all the terrorist groups in the world ever. And with the growth of the industry over the last 15 years, I would say now that these people are probably going to cause more death and suffering than the entire Second World War. And is that genocide? Yes, without a shadow of a doubt. And are they going to get away with it? Yes, because they are untouchable. They are outside the law.
Who is actually behind those decisions? Is this sanctioned by the WHO?
Sanctioned by the World Health Organization, without a shadow of a doubt. It is the same people. It's the same people sit on the ICNIRP certificate. They sit on our government's Health Protection Agency, sit on the World Health Organization. It's the same people. It's the same people. There's probably no more than 20 of them. But they are going to, in my opinion, commit the worst genocide this planet has ever known. Not just people, but animals, plants. They are probably going to cause more destruction than a global war. And in several hundred years' time, people will look back, whoever survives, and look at what we try to do to stop them. Operation Paperclip. At the end of the war, the scientists were pardoned, most of them. They were pardoned for all of the people they had killed, experimented on. They were given new identities, mostly in the United States. They were given new identities, lived an ordinary civilian life, very well paid, and they went to work in laboratories for the American government. And they handed over all of their research, and this is where it came from. And this was the basis of all of this, Operation Paperclip. If they could catch somebody and keep their name secret, that was Operation Paperclip, and they took them back. They took them back and they kept them. They used all of their resources, and there was a lot of scientists. They used all of their resources, and that was the basis of the mind control, the drugs, and everything else. I do know one experiment, just to give you some examples. I know that they found that with one of the subheadings was the microwaves on pregnant women. And they found that they could cause a 57.7 increase in miscarriages in pregnant women, which is just one experiment, you know. So what you're actually doing is killing 57% of all the children. Again, mixing microwaves or electromagnetic waves with LSD, lysergic acid, on 4-year-olds. They just experimented on people, causing any amount of suffering to the point of death. And if people ended up in metal cages or stone boxes for the rest of their lives, that was the way it was going to be, because they were allowed to be experimented on. But as I say, there is no boundary. There is nothing which, to me, is too low. I mean, if you're going to attack a uterus in a child, you can't get much lower. And this is what they were all about. At the end of the Second World War, a committee was formed by all of the Western Allies, the United States and Russia. And it was called the Nuremberg Treaty. And the Nuremberg Treaty was agreed by all the countries from the end of the Second World War. It was set up to stop people like Joseph Mengele, the Doctor of Death, in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, where he experimented on twins. And they, from the Japanese torturing the American and the British and the European soldiers, the Germans experimenting, the Nuremberg Treaty was set up, and it's very defined and very succinct. And it says that no person may be experimented upon for any reason, and this includes microwave irradiation, for any reason without their consent. And before they give their consent, they must have full knowledge of the length of the experiment, the outcomes, any potential dangers, any potential ill healths. It must be fully understood and explained, and they must give individual consent. And this includes Tetra, which is an experiment that's going on until 2018 to look for cancer and brain damage. So everybody using Tetra is actually breaking the law, the people organising them. So that was set up. So experiments on people, service personnel, the police officers with Tetra, microwaves, it is all illegal according to the Nuremberg Treaty.
As far as I know, the Nuremberg Code and the Nuremberg Treaty was created after the Nuremberg trials.
Right, yep.
And in the Nuremberg trials, there was a specific trial called the doctors' trials.
Yep.
Do you recall the sentencing of those trials?
They were hanged.
Yeah.
And I've written it. I've written it in my papers, and I've said it on air in the radio. In fact, I said it, I was on international radio. It went out to 95 countries 2 Sundays ago. And I said, scientists at the end of the war were hanged for what scientists today are doing and getting away with. Absolutely, yep.
Sentences you to death by hanging at such time and place as higher authority may direct.